Welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, and this is the show where we talk about technology and about how a better understanding of it can help you achieve better results at home, at work, and in your civic engagement. We're going to kick things off, as we like to do, with a clip from the good folks at twit.tv, Creative Commons.
This is Twit.
Jean, we first knew Jean when she worked at Smile, and of course was a fantastic advocate for one of my favorite programs, Text Expander, and then you I know currently you're community director for micro.blog, which I strongly support. This is a indie web version, open web version of Twitter. So if you're done with the Twitter experience, micro.blog. But it's also App Camp for Girls, where I really think this is a great project you're working on, and I just applaud you. And it's how many years now? You've really had some success. Yeah, well, we started the camps in 2013. And we ran them every summer, and 6 summers in a row. So over 250 kids who attended and got to learn how to make an app, and that's more than just coding. They learned the design, the brainstorming, the marketing even, and we did pitch sessions with the girls at the end of the week, and that was kind of our recital. So the parents came, and the kids put on a presentation about the apps they created that week, how much they would charge for them, how they would make money, etc.
And you modeled it after a rock camp, right?
Yes.
Like where you create a song?
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Rock camp is like you come in, you learn an instrument, you join a band, you write a song, and then you perform it on the last day of camp at a big music venue, like not just a camp. So it's very exciting, and it's so empowering because it just takes kids from a position of thinking, I don't even know how I would do that. I don't think I'm good enough to do that, to suddenly they're a rock star. So I wanted that rock star experience for kids who want to make apps.
The other thing I loved about App Camp was that you don't have to be a coder. There's this kind of thing floating around that every kid should be a coder. And you know what? Not every kid wants to be a coder. Not every kid has what it takes to be a coder. But in every app, there's more than just the person who's typing on the keyboard. There's people who are designing the marketing, who are designing the UI, the assets, the graphics. There's so many jobs around software development that I think there's a job for any child. And it's wonderful to get girls to the point where they see, oh, I could have a role in this. But there's some very sad news about App Camp that just breaks my heart.
Yeah, you will not be alone in that heartbreaking experience. Basically, it comes down to this summer, the enrollment was just not there to put on the camps that were planned, and the board decided that rather than try to somehow scramble to fill up the camps in the last month before summer, to step back and say, we have worked hard at these camps, and every year, they've been awesome, but they've also gotten harder to put on. We've been burning out volunteers at a rate that isn't sustainable, and we need to. I say we. I'm actually not on the board. In fact, I stepped back from all of my official App Camp responsibilities in 2017.
That's what went wrong. They lost you.
Well, you could argue that because I was working for free, and that's and when you have somebody working for free doing everything, that does seem really sustainable. Look at this! Oh my goodness, what we can do! But when you actually want to recruit professional nonprofit staff, they don't work for free, and
it's expensive.
And, my plan was to do it just for a short amount of time, but of course I left camp and I kept going with it longer than at that bargain basement price of free than I should have.
So we should say this had nothing to do with the lack of interest, girls don't. Oh, there's this show. Girls don't want to be.
That's right. Oh no, it's nothing like that.
It was just sustaining and growing.
It's expensive.
Yeah, very expensive.
Yeah.
As you know, we have very expensive equipment for one thing. But more it was like the hands-on necessity of the staff, because if you're going to teach kids to go from 0 to finished app in 5 days, you need some very low, counselor to camper ratios. And so we had a lot of volunteers. Generally there were as many adults involved in a session of camp as there were kids that were being served. And it was wonderful. I mean, and they learned so much, but that's just not a sustainable model. And there are a whole lot more options for kids these days in the coding and, app making world. And that's another reason, that while it's bittersweet to say, we did what we could with this model that we thought we could work, but we really, we didn't understand the sustainability challenges till, we were pretty far into it. But there are other things that the kids can do. An app camp, our name is App Camp for Girls, but we do serve girls and transgender and gender non-binary youth, which is another way that the camp evolved over time too, is that, that became important to us fairly early on.
Yeah. No boys allowed. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a terrible,
That's the wrong way to think of it. It's a chance to give an opportunity to girls who are normally and transgender and gender neutral who are normally ignored in the workplace, especially in the technical workplaces. So I think it was a great way to do a leg up. I'm really so proud of the work you did, and it shouldn't be in any way seen as a rejection of that.
No,
it's a
we have a very, very supportive community around us, and I did write a super long blog post about my take on, how we tried and what we tried and why it maybe doesn't work. But I've gotten a lot of super nice responses to that. And also, we still have our WWDC benefit show. James Dempsey and the Breakpoints puts that on every year. And the announcement from the board really came too late for us to say, let's rejigger the whole show, the whole premise of the show, because, we had everything in place for an App Camp fundraiser. And so the fundraising, still takes place. The tickets that people buy will still go to App Camp to be part of the assets that we use to figure out how to forward the mission in other ways. But we announced that, and everybody's been really supportive of that as well. And I'm really, really grateful that we have such cool people in our community.
So live near WWDC will still I love the name. We'll still come on.
Yeah, well, that's James. That's all James. Yeah.
That's great. That's really
we're
great.
very near it. This year especially, and last year in San Jose, because we're at the Ritz, which is like a block away from the convention center in San Jose.
Fun.
So will you be at the conference itself?
I won't be a ticket holder for Apple's conference, but I will be in town. My primary thing that I look forward to, besides playing guitar with James Dempsey, is the micro blog meetup. We do a meetup every year, and it's been really cool because we started out really small, and now this will be our third annual meetup of what we call a micro meetup. And for us, that is the most interesting part of WWDC, because while we have 3 apps that support blogging and photo blogging and microcasting, and of course we're interested in what Apple does with iOS and with Marzipan. For us, the big lab for Micro.blog is to meet up with the community, because the community is what Micro.blog is. The apps are tools for that. So that's pretty exciting for us.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from twit.tv.
iOS 448.
App Camp for Girls. And that was good stuff. All right, so I'm Dave Duncan. I'm joined today by Nate Darnell, as usual. Hey.
Hey.
And Max Stinson. Okay, so App Camp for Girls. Any commentary on that? I kind of like the that it was modeled on Rock Camp, where they get people in there and just, experience something that maybe people thought was beyond them.
Yeah, and it wasn't just coding.
Yeah, and it was all the support roles, right? Yeah, so it's like you can be doing the art,
interface design,
and one of the things that's really particularly important for this App Camp for Girls thing is that everyone brings their own perspective to interface, and the more diversity you have in the design of the interface, the better it's going to be for a wide range of people, or to configure. Like, if you don't have anyone that's colorblind, you're going to make some unfortunate choices. It's going to make the thing completely unusable. If you don't have any blind people, it's not going to be very good at being accessible. Also, generationally, what people intuit on newer softwares is radically different from the previous generation intuited. Yeah, like the some of the iconography, like a telephone handset. What does that mean? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you flip that, the hamburger menu. I used to teach basic tech to people, underserved communities and elderly communities when we lived back in Cincinnati at the library. People just don't intuit that the menu will be up in the top right. That's something that only somebody who's generationally used computers understand that.
Is that because they're used to looking down at their phone?
No, these are people who maybe don't even have smartphones. That they'd sit down and they didn't know. Just basically, if you sit down to interface, you kind of know generally that the gear or the cog or the hamburger menu tend to be in the top right.
Okay.
Just certain defaults. But
Right.
I'm glad they've got this kind of effort out there. Mm-hmm. And since we got you here, Max, we should do a little background on what brings you here. You are actually one of our hosts from another show.
I am. I believe I'm on later on today at 2.
2 o'clock, yes.
Or my wife and I are.
Yes, yes, the dynamic duo, subterranean style. So just give us quick the elevator pitch for Lit from the Basement.
Elevator pitch. My wife and I have 2 kids, but we also deeply love each other. The 2 kids make sure we don't get to spend much time together. So we found ourselves, so it's going to be an elevator pitch that's going up at least 10 floors.
That's fine. That's a skyscraper. No problem.
So my wife and I tried to find ways that kept us connected and checking in with each other. We found ourselves at the end of every day just going to sleep instead, like watching TV, checking out, sleeping. So we thought, well, if we did a podcast on something that if we had to produce a result weekly or now bi-weekly or every 2 weeks, we work towards that to having at least 2 hours of really fantastic conversation a week. And then that the show tends up being the product of that.
So this actually existed as a podcast before it became a series at KMUZ.
Yes.
Even though you guys are local, and so it's still a locally produced radio show. But wow, so you had what was it? How many episodes in the can when you came here?
I think we were at, by the time we started airing, I think we had 32, 33 shows maybe.
And you were producing them weekly, right?
Yes, we were.
Wow. Wow, fantastic effort.
And that's Danielle, my wife. She's a professor at Willamette. She would spend 8 hours doing pre-production. She would write a lecture, leaving lots of room for me to take us way off course.
Interesting. Okay.
And so she also, as we found out, she has to get poems that I won't be able to fully grasp.
So they can't be too easy.
Right, because then also I'm not interested. If something doesn't have my brain turning, I'm not a good co-host.
So she has 3 kids in the family.
Exactly, yes. And I just,
you're the favorite.
Yeah,
He's just the oldest.
My tantrums and wild meandering are just my language as opposed to like running around the house.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to that. But can you talk a little bit about the process of becoming a podcaster?
I had to learn, obviously, Adobe Audition.
Yeah.
And
that's their sound editing suite.
That's the sound editing suite, which is, like everything with Adobe, it's kind of a bit of a steep learning curve. But what I also did is with my time, I made templates. Here's what we do for this show. I have the template in place. So actually going back now, I don't know.
What you learned when.
Exactly, yeah. I have a library of templates.
I entered the cave and I came out enlightened.
Yes.
So as far as setting up a show, was there something in your background or something in Danielle's background that was, I mean, she was a professor, so she was used to
pedagogy and lecturing and having open lectures because students are asking her questions all day long. So
yes, okay, so she was set up for that part. Now, what was there in your background or personality that let you roll with it like that?
I really like being OCD about small things.
Perfect for engineering.
Right. So I just go in and I'm just doing like the line editing on, not the line editing, but just doing what are now several hundred edits per show.
Yeah.
So I find that strangely soothing. It's very meditative for me. I spend about 4 to 6 hours editing each show. And then after, so she has about 8 hours of pre-production in research, getting ready for whatever tangents I throw at us, and whatever questions I might ask. And I have 8 hours of post-production, usually 4 to 6 for the actual show proper, and then whatever little promo I'm doing also.
I find that really admirable. Many people don't understand how long it actually takes to sit there behind the screen with the monitors on, listening, stopping, removing, replaying, double checking, triple checking, moving forward again, and doing that for the next 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
But it was meditative for you, so that was you kind of got a freebie there.
but like he was saying, if you want to hear that difference, you just listen to show 3 and then listen to show 39, where by the time like show 3, I think had something like probably less than 30 edits in it. And then you get up to the upper 30s. Now we're looking at a couple hundred edits because I am removing those ums and the long, odd silences.
By the way, that'd probably be a good time to throw out the URL where you can find all the back episodes.
Yeah, you just go to litfromthebasement.com, and I just last week added, if you go over to the show notes tab, every single show has its own player of that show along with a poem on each page. So
Nice.
just go to our website, litfromthebasement.com, and then go to the show notes tab and just look for a poem.
Yeah, very
All,
good.
all the shows by themselves without notes are right there on the front page.
Now to the technical process.
Okay.
So you once you've edited the show together and you've added music and all this stuff. All right, so what happens between that and it showing up on litfromthebasement.com? How did you set that up? Because if I go to my podcast listener and search for your show, it's there.
Okay.
So what was the process of getting listed? And what kind of
it was.
services did you need? And
It was constantly everything's do it yourself. So I didn't know about this. So I had to go and listen to podcasts about hosting podcast shows.
and there's lots, right?
Yeah. And actually, any service you pick up, I use Buzzsprout, or we use Buzzsprout. They have their own podcast telling you how to interface with what they have to offer.
And this ties into one of our long-term themes of the show of diving into technology and being empowered by it and being able to just have a confidence that if you're really interested in getting something to work, there's so much video and articles out there now. If you know how to type a question into Google and you're willing to do a lot of reading and watching, you'll get there.
Another big motivator is the immediacy of your work. You can, spend an hour editing, hit play, listen to it. You're doing the graphics, doing anything. At least it does scratch that itch.
Well, Duncan may think that technology motivates. I tend to be the pessimist of the group, where I still have my iPhone 4S and I'm known as the Amish astronaut because I always keep one foot in the old world. But I have to admit that in terms of shooting videos and doing those types of things, I really still respect the old approach to videography, where you have an innate understanding of what a good camera angle is and what good lighting is. And although you can, to an extent, make up for a lot of that with the newer software, which can kind of fabricate lights if you needed to, or kind of make up for the lack of perhaps skill that you might have, there's a lot of extra overhead in running those systems. Whereas if you just had innate practice at how to line up the shot,
Block a shot.
you can do it a lot faster. And so, admittedly, I do support the new stuff, but I'm conscious not to become unnecessarily reliant upon it, just like with writing. I guess this might fall into Danielle's territory, but they have all these new grammar programs that are supposed to write this stuff for you. I for one, I'm thinking, you're never going to develop strong neural pathways or memory if you're allowing this thing to do it for you.
Nor hone your own voice. What I super love about the technologies that are available also because the Creative Suite is, I remember as a kid, I always wanted to make some kind of film. And there was one, but I mean, Super 8, I come from, not affluent people, so that was cost prohibitive. There was no film and stuff. I used to watch the show on PBS about was this kid whose parents would pay for his film and he just cut and spliced. It showed what he did.
Yeah.
And he made his little films. He did like laser shoots with ballpoint pens. Now my kids, I actually have them. I've
Stretching
shot
the film and
I've
leaving white behind.
Well, no. Now I've made them a lightsaber fight beholders and shoot electricity from their hands because I have the Adobe stuff.
Oh, nice.
So I try to get them excited about creating plays that I then do over the top ridiculous. Maybe a dragon appears in it. Trying to get them excited for creation and that they will maybe want to shoot, block, and edit their own is what I'm hoping I'm conditioning them for.
And that's a good transition into this thing that I was recently excited about, which was you just kind of an offhand way and very modestly were like, oh, yeah, I took a clip from one of our shows and I made a little animation thing to it. And I was like, oh, I love this thing. So if you go to YouTube and search for Lit from the Basement, you will find a little clip from an early episode.
So the only record in many cases that we have that these athletes did these things is Pindar.
Okay. And that was a person.
And it was a person.
Okay.
Yeah, Pindar is a person. And so I don't enjoy those. Many of Pindar's odes are like, and then calamitous, through the spear toward the mountain of, Bubba. And I just don't.
It's sports writing. Many
early sports writing.
Yeah, eons removed.
Yeah. Oh, you took something I love, poetry, and married it with something I don't, sports.
And it's you and Danielle as animated characters, and you started with it's like, okay, I can't draw. That's what
no, I cannot.
So tell me how the process of going from I don't know how to do this, I can't draw. What did you find? What did you put together to make this happen?
It was while I was playing with the Adobe Premiere to edit something my boys had done, just to do a little special effect with them.
Lightsaber thing or something, yeah.
And then I came across, when it popped up, it also popped up on a thing saying try Character Animator, because they had made it and packaged it and sent it out with Adobe Premiere. It is basically waist up motion capture. You do I just have a simple Logitech camera I have had for 10 years, and it looks at your face and it maps your face and it knows where your eyebrows are.
So you did the eyebrows by wiggling your eyebrows?
Yes. Oh yeah. So you saw the eyebrows actually wiggle. That was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If you'll notice,
that was the finale. That was the piece de resistance.
And then there's things where I'm actually biting my upper lip. It tracks and it knows the viseme to put for that. It's very. That's why some of it's incredibly fluid, and the parts that aren't fluid are Punch and Judy puppets that people have. And that's actually what Adobe Character Animator calls it. It calls it a puppet. And you have what it can trace for you, and that's your head movement, left or right. And I haven't gotten into parallax yet, but you can actually turn in a profile, and it'll animate a profile for you also.
It'll spin the background? Mm-hmm. What?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm like, you know what? That's a lot of work. Maybe if I keep doing this on twice a month, maybe I'll get into some parallax view.
As you go, you'll say, okay, I'm going to add this.
Right. I keep seeing things like, man, if we keep doing this, I'd like to add parallax view.
Now, the caricature of you and Danielle, that came from some sort of clip art library? Or?
That comes from, I go to freepik.com. And it's all vector graphics.
Okay.
And here's what I learned.
I love vector graphics. So vector graphics is as opposed to pixelated graphics. So you're just saying, okay, start at this point and go this direction with this curvature for this amount of distance. And what that gives you is something that can be scaled to any size without any sort of pixelization.
Yeah,
there's no
from size to building size, it will not pixelate.
Right, and it's also something that computers are very good at manipulating, because I have a path and I can just alter that path and I alter that part of the image.
And they are paths. So what I do is with these, and again, I cannot draw, but I can manipulate these images that I get from Freepik. So what I did is I would take an image and then I would open it in Illustrator, and then I would just open up every layer. Like, so a shoe can have God knows how many layers to it. One for the eyelets, one for the shoe, one for the different pattern, one for the stitching. So, you lump together what you're not going to use.
And generally layers you group functionally. So it's like, okay, this is something I want to manipulate by itself, or I want to use it somewhere else. So I'm going to give it its own layer so it's easy to move independent of everything else.
Yeah, and so the main things you have independent on your puppets are your head, your eyes, and your hands, and you actually grab the hands by the mouse button and move them like they were sticks, like you use sticks on a puppet.
And it articulates the elbow and shoulder and all that.
I let it know where there's things you put in called sticks that act as bones, like saying, okay, if I move the arm, do not let it bend. Only let it bend to here.
Do not let it disconnect.
Yeah. Also, it used to be a problem with early Adobe Character Animator. It wouldn't stop stretching. So if you grabbed it and moved it, you might accidentally pull the arm.
Gumby arm.
Mr. Fantastic.
Yeah. It would turn into like it start wrapping. And you're like, oh, this is failing because I didn't put in bones into the puppet.
Oh, I forgot the bones.
There's
only in tech can you forget the bones.
The Illustrator graphics, I just have basic manipulation of them, and then I just. I put gray hair on one of the puppets. I changed the color on this. I gave Danielle, I found, I made the hair a little bit match hers more. And then you can put weights. If you notice, her hair moves freely.
Yeah.
So I could put a thing called a dangle, It's literally called a dangle.
Wow.
On wherever you want a hanging object to have physics to it. And then I say how much. Is there wind? No wind. How much is the gravity? And you kind of set again, I have a template, boom. I have our gravity for our hair set up, and I don't do it. And you can and conversely, you can do spring. So the hair can if the hair is springy, it goes upwards. And so as I'm moving around, as I'm moving left or right, the hair will move. So I animated Danielle's puppets also.
You know how long it took for Monsters Inc. to get that right? And now it's at home.
Yeah, that's what I keep thinking. Like, what is it? Like the Commodore 64 computer, my first computer, I found out had enough computing power to put somebody on the moon. Like,
more than enough.
Yeah.
Four-function calculator had enough computing power, just applied slightly differently.
Right. And so now I'm looking at like, animators 10 years ago, I got that power in my garage in my office.
Yeah, I must say, I had a little bit of a problem when they were like, "Oh, we're going to sell this to you on a subscription. You can never just buy something."
Not a fan.
But they keep updating it. So on the flip side, if you're going to have, if you're going to turn your clients into digital serfs, at least give them lots of new features on a regular basis.
And that is true. It's almost, something is new on Adobe in their Creative Suite weekly.
Yeah.
Now, and I gotta say, I kind of like the idea of paying once and being done.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff they put up is actually quite fascinating, especially with the character animator. And the character animator every year, it's only been out for just a couple of years, they just make gargantuan jumps every year in what they can do.
And there's a lot of interesting free stuff out there. I don't want to, downplay, make this Adobe ad because just Monday night, I went to the makerspace in Portland called Control H, and they had, I was there for Dorkbot Night, which is a robotics group that they let use their space on a couple times a month. And there was a gentleman there had a setup of Open Pose running, and what he had was a desktop computer with old webcam like you were describing, and on the screen was what the webcam was seeing. Overlaid on that was the skeletons rendered in real time on everybody that was in its field of view. So it could tell the difference between your left arm and your right arm. It could tell where your eyes were. There was like a little V stick that went up to where your eyes were. So when it had the left and right arms colored differently, so you could tell that when someone turned away, it was tracking that's a left arm. It's
like anterior,
you're facing
posterior.
away. Yeah. All the way down to feet. People, they're partially obscured by desks and stuff. It just was very vividly animating everything that it could see. And it was doing it at something like 6 frames per second, which was fine. And I look at that thing, and you can hang anything off that. You could do a vector graphic, and you can have those all be animated characters.
Yeah.
And that was free software. So the stuff is out there. You can do whatever you're interested in doing by just looking around. 90% it's already been built, and the other 10%, hey, why don't you build it?
I think the hardest thing for doing something like that, or doing anything, is learning the language of what you want to know.
Yes, so you know how to search for it.
Right, like I didn't know until 3 days ago that the hamburger menu on
those 3 lines were called the hamburger.
Yeah. But that they don't have that in the Adobe Creative Suite. They have those, but they serve a different function. But the whole collapse, uncollapse that we have with Windows, they call theirs twill.
Twill.
Twill it down, twill it up. Like I wouldn't have, they kept saying twill. I'm like, what is twilling?
Yeah,
so
Google,
I had to
Google twill.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
So you're trying to find out, if you want to do something like just learning the name for what the process is you want to do, I find is the hardest thing, because you don't even know what to ask or how to ask.
That is somewhat subject to Google as well. It's like, what is box with 3 lines on it? And so it's like, this is a hamburger.
Yeah.
It's a box with 3 lines on it. It's like, so if you are persistent, you will find a way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get in one clip from twit.tv. This is This Week in Google 510, Google's Sweatshop.
This is Twit. Big article in the New York Times about Google's use of contract employees. I wanted you to address this a little bit, Jeff, because it's been my experience, this is very common practice in all Silicon Valley companies. Microsoft doesn't, and many companies don't hire employees. They hire firms who hire employees, and those contract employees save them a lot of money. Although this seems pretty egregious. About half of Google's employment is contract employees.
Yeah, let's a few things about this. One is others do it, right? Conde Nast did it. Vox has a union now, and there's a kerfuffle today about how they're hiring freelancers. But the thing I don't know about the Google story is, if it's the person delivering your groceries, should that be the same permanence as a software engineer at Google? If it's the person who's answering customer service, and I don't mean to degrade their work, but to a Google, they're more interchangeable.
Yeah, this doesn't
so it's
say
not
much.
just about saving money. It's about potentially what the relationship is. Now, there was a few years ago, security guards on campus were not Google employees. They were hired outside, and there was a kerfuffle, and they were brought on staff.
Well, let me just say something about that. Because we have an armed guard, a security guard, Mo, who's great. You met him.
Yep.
Really great guy, former Marine, well-trained in the use of firearms, I might add. But we can't hire him because our insurance would go through the roof because he has a firearm.
Right.
And so we hire a security company. He works for the security company.
I would like to have him in a twit cop uniform.
I want a twit cop. I do.
Yeah,
That's a good idea. Maybe we should hire him just for that.
I mean, to me,
but that makes sense. But if I look at the numbers, this is the New York Times got an internal document, and it said as of March, Google had 121,000. Yeah, it's more than 50%. 121,000 temps and contractors. This is globally compared to 102,000 full-time employees. So it's got to be more than just the security guard out front.
Do you remember what Kevin did for them? I can't remember.
Kevin Toffel was not an employee. And Kevin pointed out that when you're not an employee, it's a very weird position if you're in the Googleplex because you can't eat in some of the cafeterias. Yeah. You can't come to the all-hands meetings.
Your access card only gets you into certain buildings.
You're really a second-class citizen.
Yeah.
So the question,
I think if they have that many, I could see, like you said, the occasional position or maybe a few people in a division, but that's over 50% of their entire staff.
Seems like
and they don't get any benefits. They get paid less. I mean, that seems pretty egregious to me.
What do you think, Jeff?
Well, again, I go to a place like Conde Nast.
It's common practice.
There, and the majority of the people who did work for Conde Nast were freelancers. I'm not saying that's right. And indeed, U.S. law is now such that I know when I try to hire people now, it is really hard to hire somebody not as an employee. I end up having to bring people onto staff for a 4-week gig. Bring them on staff. I've got to pay benefits to the university. I've got to do all that stuff because you can't come on as a consultant or a freelancer unless you have a business doing that. And you can prove it with a client list and business cards and stationery and all kinds of stuff.
That's an IRS regulation. The IRS has for years been cracking down on this practice because a lot of businesses avoided benefits. That was the chief reason to do it.
Yeah. So
avoided
this
benefits by hiring temps or contract employees.
The New York Times story quotes someone saying you can save $100,000 a year per job.
Depends what you're paying them.
So if you've got 121,000,
that's a lot of money.
Contractors, that's a lot of money.
This reminds me a lot of the Dutch sandwich and the Irish wraparound or whatever those tax maneuvers are. They're not illegal, but they're taking advantages of loophole in the law to make more money. And I guess on the one hand, especially publicly held corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to take advantage of these loopholes since they are legal. My tax attorney always used to say, we don't use him anymore. Leo, pay no, not a penny less than you owe and not a penny more than you should. Whatever. The idea is if there's a loophole and you don't take advantage of it, you're not doing your job. So I'm sure Google would defend this in the same way. Look, this is legal. And the minute it's not legal, then
but is
we'll
it
stop.
right?
It's not right any more than the Irish runaround is.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works in the United States. And the thing that bothers me is the reason it's that way is because corporations spend lots of money on political action committees and lobbyists and elections to keep the laws in their favor, and it's too bad. Anyway, we use temp employees. You guys don't work for Twit, but when you're in the building, you're an employee. So I mean, I guess in a way you could say the same thing about Twit. Probably half of our employees, or more than half, are contractors. But it's exactly as you said, Jeff. They fit the IRS requirement, which is they do this for a living with other clients. That's why we never stop people from having other podcasts. That there's generally, it's supposedly the schedule is your own. You're not told you have to be here at a certain time. That's not the case for you guys. But on the other hand, when you have to be out of town, you go. When Stacey,
you're very forgiving. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the law. You think I would let you take time off if I didn't have to?
you could dock
forgiving
our
because
measly
it's the
pay.
law.
Yes.
Well, yeah, actually, you don't get paid when you're not here, but that's also a benefit of a temp or contractor.
Of a temp, yeah, that's the thing. It's flexible on both sides.
Yeah, you pay them only when they work.
But it feels to me as though someone could craft a law so that if 52% of your staff are contractors, that crosses some threshold.
Yeah, and part of this is exacerbated by the fact that the IRS has been significantly cut back on its ability to enforce. They don't have a huge enforcement ability anyway. So, the IRS has essentially been gutted. So you can get away with it even if it's not strictly legal. You have to get an interpretation. You have to get the IRS. You have to get tax court to say no, it's not legal. You could say, well, I believe so. Well, okay, the tax court says no, but I don't know how many judges. There's 8 or 9 judges in the tax court. There are not a lot of them. The IRS has 9,000 auditors, down a third from 2010.
Yeah.
The last time the IRS had fewer than 10,000 revenue agents was 1953, and the economy was 1/7 of its current size at that time. And it's still shrinking. The IRS conducted 675,000 fewer audits in 2017 than it did in 2010, a drop in the audit rate of 42%. So that's the other side of this, is if it's not enforced, you can.
Right.
I mean, there's clearly a case to be made. Oh, no, these are real contractors. And then if the IRS disagrees, they have to pursue it. And if they don't have the resources to do so, they won't.
And the New York Times story says that about 10 years ago, it was only a third of employees, and now it's over half.
Yeah, well.
But again, the kinds of functions that have been added.
Yeah. They could be driving Waymo vehicles.
Literally delivering groceries.
Yeah,
right.
Or content moderation or...
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, same with Facebook and their content moderators. They've reportedly hired 30,000 of them. I think the vast majority are through contracted agencies, companies.
Email messages about workplace security concerns that go to full-time staff are often not shared with contract workers. In a letter to Sundar Pichai, temp workers complained the company sent security updates only to full-time employees during that shooting at YouTube's offices last year. Contractors weren't told there's an active shooter. They were also...
I wonder if they even had a Google email address. They probably had their own independent email address. They weren't on a company group.
YouTube says that was an oversight.
Yeah, well, it was.
So yeah, I don't know what to make of this. They wouldn't be doing it if it weren't legal, or at least if there weren't a reasonable interpretation that it's legal. But since that interpretation stands, unless the IRS
there's always a
disputes
fight
it,
about this.
Yeah, this is a constant battle. I know, and we're very careful. We have, we outsource payroll and HR to a payroll company, and they are the ones who enforce, and they have very strict rules, and we always try to adhere to all those rules, because nobody wants the Spanish Inquisition.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was This Week in Google 510, talking about the Google sweatshop effect of having more than half your employees be quote-unquote contractors. Joined today by Nate Darnell and Max Stinson.
Hello.
And so, guys, I saw some strong reactions over there especially to that last point of, let's not bother to tell the contractors that there's an active shooter around.
Yeah, I think that's as far as that argument needs to go.
Did we put the end up front? Okay, let's go back. Let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to...
If people can actually get killed because you're not classifying them as employees, then there's a problem.
Right.
Well, then, they are no longer people after that, and the problem resolves itself. Isn't that a corporate thing?
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
That's right.
For some reason, I thought there was an initial question, like, should Google get rid of its contractors or something along those lines?
Well, the Google employees are striking because they're working side by side with people that are getting paid significantly less than they are, and they're their comrades in arms. And there's a very good, very good morale at Google. The employees feel empowered, especially because they have a skill set that they can quit their jobs and walk across the street, and Google is SOL because they can't go out and hire more people of the quality that just left. It's not like, the box boy they don't really care about because they can hire someone who's starving to, it's like, oh, that's a homeless person, let him do it. Yeah. But those highly trained engineers, they cannot afford to lose those. So like when they said, we don't think you should be doing search engine in China, it's like, okay, fine.
Or Project Maven.
Or Project Maven, doing what it was military applications of
AIs
or AI
in wartime.
Yeah,
they're like that's not
Skynet.
Yeah, yes, we have many movies warning us against this.
Yeah. It's like how much didn't take the hint, did you? You just got
Fortunately,
excited.
those employees had a moral compass, and they were like, "This just does not feel right. We just can't do this."
Yeah, so this is something that's replicated all over the place in situations where the employees do not have the kind of leverage to. Yeah.
Right. So I have a couple of comments to make, and number one is I think it's very easy to make an emotional snap judgment about what you would want as an employee, or if you were a contractor, what you would like to have if you were.
Here's the pro-corporate view, so let's keep it short because I want to do the response.
It's not a pro-corporate. It's if you step back from the 30,000-foot level, I think this can be broken up into two primary views. What are the domestic implications and what are the international implications? Because General Motors could not compete internationally while it was under the burden of 60 years of retirement payments to a retired workforce when Toyota and Honda and other Japanese manufacturers didn't have those legacy costs associated with their manufacturing processes. So what happened in 2008 was a structured bankruptcy that wasn't brought about by the banking collapse. It was already engineered long before that, and the banking collapse was used as a strategy with which to dig out from underneath that process. Now that we're going up against China based on these international relations, snafus and all kinds of things, is there an added benefit in keeping Google hyper competitive by allowing them to have more contractors rather than employees? These are the things that need to be parsed out. And again, it's very easy to say, hey, I want to be an employee so I get medical benefits. But on the international scale, what does that actually look like when we're dealing with competitive countries?
Okay, on the human side, I'll say let's not race to the bottom and say, let's make our conditions equal to the worst conditions in the world. We have these billion-dollar companies that are just making money hand over fist, and I'm not very sympathetic when they say, "Oh, we can't be competitive with the other super rich companies." Well, then don't be. That's fine. We're living here, and we have a different standard. Like the thing that jumped out at me from that Google story is they were talking about how making them a contractor saved them $100,000 per employee, and there was 100,000 plus of these people that were being classified as contractors instead of employees, which means they're saving $10 billion a year. And where's that savings coming from? It's coming from the pockets of the people that are doing the actual work that makes them Google.
Right. And GE has an entire department dedicated to not paying any taxes ever. Like for the company.
Yeah.
Like they have an entire anti-tax department, and it's publicly known.
That's why
GE seldom ever pays taxes.
In that department isn't the one exempt from taxes, that their whole mission is to find.
Their whole mission is to ensure that the company never has to pay taxes. Right. Amazon is no longer any different. Amazon does the same exact thing.
That's my other issue with this is it's a big company's game. They have the law power and accounting power to move things to other countries or whatever they need to do to evade regulations. So I'm for contractors in small business, which is the most dominant form of contributing to the economy. It's the small business people and the people they hire, and where you have these big company regulations that are basically mean the difference between them being able to do business and not being able to do business. Fine, contract out your HR or payroll, or that makes a lot of sense.
Now the flip side of this argument is it didn't, and I haven't read the article, but there are some contractors that are paid a lot of money, and they don't mind being contractors because they know how to manage their own health expenses. They know how to manage other expenses. What I'd like to see is whether or not those individuals who are leveraging complaints against Google truly are making less than what's considered a reasonable wage when it's all said and done, because I do think that there's a legitimate argument to be had there. But I think what we need is really a graduated scale. And for example, there are very small companies that intentionally hire contractors because they only need them for a specific project, and it's not cost effective for them to keep someone on payroll that's worth $100,000 to $200,000 a year when they're only going to use them 4 months or 4 weeks out of the year. Right? And so to come up with a black and white policy doesn't make sense. But what is a graduated policy? Say, like, look, if you're a company that makes over $1 billion a year, there's an expectation that, less than 50% of your workforce is going to be subcontracted.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's a rational argument to be made with regulations developed around, or depending on the industry that you're in.
One of the other things that jumped out about that for me was the person from a university talking about how he had to, go for a staffed position, even if it was just a 4-week gig. And that was because the university had taken a principled position of we're not gonna gut people by making them contractors, and they took it to an extreme.
Every penny of a public institution has to be watched and seen where it goes. And so if you just I can see their hesitancy because it could possibly get abused.
And very sensitive to scandal. That's
right.
Yeah.
But I think another metric or another hallmark or milestone to put in is if you tell the person or you make whoever this contractor is sign a no compete or do not compete, then then that person's an employee.
Exactly, and I completely agree with that. And now on the flip side, I would say I've worked in both capacities, and there are times when I have just not agreed with the person that was leading the project, and I was arguably a subordinate team member. As a contractor, I had the free liberty to agree to disagree and walk away. Where had I been an employee, I would have received some type of negative performance review, and then if I would have tried to receive employment elsewhere, I generally would have been somehow subjected to that, and it would have followed me elsewhere. Whereas as an independent contractor, I could just say, look, we disagreed about the direction the project was going, and I decided to stop working on that project.
One of the things I think is most appropriate for independent contracting is people that have that psychological bent where they need to have that, I am not subordinate to people that are, less capable than myself by my estimation, right? And I have a skill set that's in demand everywhere, and I can fill my billet as much as I want and not interact with anyone as a boss. And that's appropriate. That's, the company gets the labor for cheaper. The individual gets a working situation they can live with. But being forced into contracting, that's just another form of exploitation as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you that I completely disagree with the way that things are rolling out with Uber and a lot of the delivery services. And I disagree with that process because I ran a fleet for years in the tech industry, and I knew by virtue of turning my own wrench how much money it actually costs to keep a car on the road. And as I watched these systems roll out, I said, it's costing you more than $1 or more. If you do everything, if you do everything by what the automobile manufacturer recommends to keep that car operational, it's going to cost you more than $1 a mile. They will not reveal that to you.
Yeah, you're basically liquidating the value of your car.
But between the fuel, between all the consumables, the tires, the wear and tear, and then when you factor in the fact that modern automobiles are not built, even though they're snazzier looking, are not built to last more than 12 years maximum because of the concept of engineered obsolescence and the number of electronic problems that can be had with these machines compared to the older ones where you can generally identify what broke. And even
just by opening the hood.
And even if the manufacturer no longer makes the part, a skilled local mechanic can replace it with something else that would be, functional. But the amount of money that they're being paid, because they haven't done that gig long enough, they don't understand their total cost of operations. And so they're making a small amount of cash now, which will eventually be eroded, as this car begins to fail. And they also don't understand the amount of energy and wear and tear on your body as you do this day in and day out. As someone who used to drive 80,000 miles a year, they don't quite have that.
Sitting injuries,
Yeah. And in their mind yet, or in their frame of reference, or the fact that they might have a partner or children that they want to care for, and yet they're on the road nonstop just trying to make ends meet. So these industries are really similar to Airbnb. As Duncan would like to say, they're externalizing all their costs to
internalizing all the revenue
to naive people that don't fully understand because they're not clearly educated or wise enough yet in the space to understand how much it's really going to cost them to do that. What is the cost of opportunity? And they're only short-sighted in the process.
And that's the pseudo-free market where one party does not have information that the other party has.
That's correct. Yeah. Now, if you're a seasoned contractor, you know enough about what it truly costs and what that pricing threshold is to make a little money when you're cutting even and when you're losing money. And my experience is that that's generally 1/3 above. Like the cutting even is 1/3 above what the market is currently selling it at.
Yeah.
That's your ignorance premium.
That's right. And the people that actually know what they're doing are billing at least twice what the market is billing at. And those are the people that are going to be around for an extended period of time. but nobody wants to buy their services because they think that the fake price that they're buying everything at is the sustainable price, and it's not. That is the meat grinder price, which is the starving students that are looking to make some quick cash are willing to exploit their resources so that the other company can make all the profits. This is a process that I do not agree with, and it's an exploitation of the human race.
It's an inequality, and it's similar to in housing where the prices are driven up by people borrowing.
Yeah, and this is why it's important to have appropriate regulatory processes. But in so doing, I think it's also important to recognize, like you said, Duncan, there are personalities that are just fiercely independent.
Yeah.
And they know, just like I would argue, like military contractors, there are some like, that's just what they do.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, nobody who works for Blackwater or whatever it's called now. They've got
They're not set up for daycare.
No. Those guys aren't going to be bringing coffee or doing WordPerfect or anything.
No.
And they don't want to hear about the TPS reports.
No.
Yeah.
Or PC load letter.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That would have come to a head real quick.
Right. And let me give you an example of something that really bothered me about 6 months ago. And I saw it coming years ago, but then I saw it in action, and it was just really disturbing. At a local restaurant that's kind of a national chain, they have these little computers now on the top.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm deeply hateful of that.
Okay, and so what I watched somebody who clearly was a customer and was having a bad day, and this waiter, this waiter received this horrible review. I watched the whole thing go down, and from this little touch screen thing. Oh. And because it allows you to do your credit card processing and then give a review for this waiter.
Oh, on the same.
I did not know where you were going.
I was thinking of the register where it's like press this button if it's a hot dog or something.
No. This is worse. Those are the fecal matter, like touch screens, that they have at like the hamburger shops now. No, this is different. This goes back to a database where it then records any demerits that particular waiter or waitress receives,
triggering an email to chiding you.
And then based on this algorithm, they are not invited back the next weekend to serve on that day, which it could just be something that they're making money paying for their basic bills, and because a customer had a bad day and there was no arbitration process like a manager who could go in there and do kind of like damage control, understand the waiter or waitress that they've worked with routinely. There was a black and white decision made by an algorithm that said this customer was unhappy, therefore this waiter is not allowed to come back.
And it didn't take into account that this customer is always unhappy.
This is the point, and this is what happens when you allow this kind of technology to then rule over people, where there's no,
you get trolled at your job.
Yes, and there's no kind of gray thinking.
Well, and there's no consequences to the company for just throwing someone away like you use tissue paper.
But normally you have someone in the management chain who will go out and make amends, whatever it is,
or a judgment call saying this person's crazy.
Exactly.
But that's a different business model, right?
Yeah.
That's where
you got to pay a manager. Let's get rid of that cost too.
You got to pay your manager. You have an investment in your frontline staff that they're doing. That the staff that have been here 5 years are going to do a better job than the person who's been here for 6 months. But the alternative model is you treat them as replaceable cogs. You offload all the skills, all the relevant skills that someone might enter into things, like say their ability to have a discussion with someone that gets some feedback, and they just automate all those steps. And it's like, okay, well, it won't do as good a job, but the cost saving is so much that we're still making more money.
And then if you can raise the subsequent generation to have lower standards and expectations, then it just perpetuates.
Yeah.
It's like
as a consumer as well.
Exactly. Well,
it all starts with metal detectors in high schools.
Why do I need a car to last 12 years?
Just get used to being treated like a prisoner.
I've got to have new wheels in 4 because they look better.
Yeah. The what I thought you were going with that was the how McDonald's is now doing the order kiosk.
I hate that too.
I avoid it. It's just
I avoid McDonald's to begin with, but
I have.
Is this where they have like the actual order takers in another country?
No. This is where you go up to a touch screen and you order your food.
Oh, just get rid of
that. You pay there, and when they call the number, you go up and you pick it up.
They rolled that out about 6 months ago.
Right. So I'm now, without getting a discount, I'm ordering my own food. and somebody's not getting paid an hourly wage.
Right.
Yeah.
We need
someone
more
was paid
jobs.
to push these buttons that I'm pushing now.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that according to the most recent research, there's fecal matter all over these like touch screens.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that too.
They should each come with a handy wipe dispenser right next to them.
But I'm sure there's that kind of matter in the food as well. That's why I don't eat there. I mean, if you've ever watched some of these documentaries, you know, it gets pretty gnarly. That being said, I mean, this is why I try to keep one foot in the old world, because at the end of the day, the problem is that we keep allowing this technology to influence our thinking, and as a result of that, our ability to process, think through things, and develop strong neural pathways and decision-making abilities is being eroded. Mm-hmm. And while we are becoming more proficient in flitting around with gadgetry, I think that we're becoming less proficient in thinking critically. And it's not gonna help if we continue to become more and more technologically dependent.
Also, just to go off on a further tangent from using what you just said as a springboard, advancing only STEM education, because STEM does not teach you to think critically other than actual number logic.
Yes, how to do technological jobs that will probably be automated in the future anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
So I mean, like, there's nothing in the STEM curriculum that
if you want to make
tells
money,
you how to
study
think.
the arts, because that's the last thing that will be replaced.
And
so
it
teaches you to think.
Yeah.
As somebody with an art degree, don't do that. For listeners at home, don't get a degree in art.
But there is a renewed interest in the liberal arts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Predominantly because of the kind of flexible thinking that you have to have, the ability to, knowing that you can hire technically inclined people to do almost any job. At this point, half of it's artificial intelligence anyway.
And the skill that's required for every job only falls.
Right. But how do you communicate and influence other human beings? Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of these soft skills that you begin honing
sociology,
in liberal arts.
philosophy.
Yeah, whether or not it's Willamette or Yale or any of the others that have literally specialized in those for years, whereas you have your other engineering schools that do their hard sciences. But a lot of those positions are being done away with simply through artificial intelligence.
But also just pressure, like the Koch brothers having all the humanity departments in Florida defunded. I mean, people have an active interest in...
That's my personal preference, and I have billions of dollars, so bye.
Well, because it is the sociology department that out there are rabble-rousing, making so much noise. So, no, I give
those
a lot of money
who object to the fall of civilization must be silenced. That's the problem.
Like my alma mater is George Mason University, which just renamed its law center the Scalia Law Center because of the Koch brother money there.
Interesting.
And that now the Koch brothers, I guess, have the say on the faculty hired there. Now, this is my old alma mater, so I get extra angry about that.
Yeah. So
let me just say this. Family and brought them into a cult.
You know, I as technologically experienced as I am, I've learned to always keep one kind of foot in old school and even religious thought to some extent. And I do think there's relevant in taking one day a week where there's like no technology. Mm-hmm. You know, and you can equate that to the Sabbath or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you take that away, number one,
they were looking way ahead when they're saying don't operate
honestly,
devices. Right?
I'm beginning to wonder. You know, now that you go back and read,
they
some
had
of
the
this
gift
old
of
stuff.
prophecy.
Yes, that's right. But number one, you separate from this anxiety promoting internet, which just swamps you in negative energy with just negative press reports and conflict all day long, which has a negative impact on your headspace. But it also forces you to think outside the computer and to work with other people directly. If you just take a day off, like you put your phone down, you put your computer
the CPU
down,
box.
and you're actually communicating with your partner or your kids or your neighbors or something along those lines. I think there's a lot to be said about that.
Like, say, making a podcast.
Well, that's still tech, but I think we'll call it Luddite Fridays.
I think so.
Luddite
Fridays. Whichever day you choose.
Yeah.
Because Friday's still the work week. I'd have a problem with that with some of my...
No, religious freedom. I don't have to... It's Luddite Friday.
I'm feeling this is the slowest transition ever into New Health Radio.
It is.
So,
it is.
So let's,
but the mental health thing was a segue.
Yeah. So with that, I think you've done it again. You've spent well over an hour talking tech with David, Nate, and Max, and how a better understanding of it can help you achieve better outcomes at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. I hope you'll join us to continue this conversation next week and every week, noon to 1 o'clock on Wednesdays for Northwest Tech Show.